Imagine a continent untouched by cities, unmarked by roads, its horizon stretching into forever. The wind carries the scent of wild grasses, the distant thunder of hooves, and the silent weight of something ancient. This is North America, more than 13,000 years ago, a place alive with mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, and people whose skill and resilience would shape the land in ways we are only beginning to understand. They are the Clovis people, masters of stone, hunters of giants, and, perhaps most intriguingly, a civilization that would rise to prominence and then vanish, leaving behind only their tools, their bones, and questions that have haunted generations. Of archaeologists, we know them from the sharp precision of their work. Long, fluted spear points, shaped with an artistry so advanced that modern flint knappers still struggle to replicate it. We know them from the rare and precious sites where their artifacts rest beside the bones of colossal beasts, frozen in time as if the hunters had just stepped away. And we know them from a single burial, the remains of a child laid to rest in Montana, dusted with red ochre, surrounded by stone and bone treasures that tell of a people who understood death as much as they did life. Yet for all we know, far more slips through our fingers like sand. Who were they before they became the Clovis? Where did they come from? How did they live in a world both dangerous and bountiful? And perhaps most compelling, why did they disappear? Some scholars once believed they were the very first humans to set foot in the Americas, their arrival marking the dawn of human history here. But evidence has emerged that challenges this, hinting at older settlements and deeper mysteries. Still, the Clovis remained the first people we can clearly see through the archaeological record. Their culture spread across the continent like a fleeting spark. Sit back and picture the scene, the endless plains, the shadow of a mammoth against the sunset, the glint of a spear point in the fading light. The Clovis walked this land for only a few centuries, but their story, part fact, part endured for millennia. And as we begin our journey into their world, one question will follow us from the first step to the last. What force, natural or human, could cause an entire civilization to fade into silence? It began not in the deep wilderness where the Clovis once hunted, but in the quiet dust of New Mexico in the early 20th century. The year was 1929, and a young man named Ridgely Whiteman wandered near a dry stream called Blackwater Draw. He had read about the recent discoveries in Folsom, New Mexico, and shone spear points buried with the bones of extinct bison, and now he found himself staring at something similar, though different, half buried in the sun-baked earth. What Whiteman had stumbled upon was not just another Paleandean site, it was the type site, the first definitive evidence of a culture that had hunted mammoths and crafted tools unlike any seen before. Over the next several years, teams of archaeologists descended on the area. They worked methodically, sifting through layers of sediment, revealing artifacts lying side by side with the remains of colossal Columbian mammoths and archaic bison. The stone points they uncovered had a shape that drew immediate attention, long, thin, and fluted, a signature that would come to define the Clovis culture. The work continued through the 1930s, with Edgar Billings Howard and later John L. Cotter leading the excavations. They unearthed more than just tools. They uncovered a moment in time when human hands and Ice Age giants had crossed paths. At first, many believed these finds marked the earliest human presence in the Americas, a clean line in the sand between prehistory and history. Blackwater Draw became a name whispered with awe among archaeologists, the place where the continent's story seemed to begin. But like all great discoveries, it raised as many questions as it answered. Where had these people come from? How had their technology spread so far, so fast? And why, after flourishing across North America, had they vanished so completely that only their stone blades remained? Even in the stillness of the excavation sites, with the sun beating down and the wind scattering dust across ancient bones, there was a sense of pursued chase through time itself. Each point, each fragment of bone was a clue, but the trail led into darkness, and somewhere beyond that darkness, the truth waited, silent, as if daring us to find it. From that dusty stream in New Mexico, the search for the Clovis people began, and it has never truly ended. Next, we step back further, beyond the discovery, to the world they knew, a landscape both alien and familiar, where survival was a daily test written in ice, stone, and blood. Picture North America not as we know it, but as a continent caught in the fading grip of the last ice age. The year is somewhere around 13,000 years ago. Vast glaciers sprawl over the north, walls of ice taller than cathedrals, pressing down on the land with an ancient weight. To the south, open plains stretch endlessly, dotted with towering mammoths, shaggy mastodons, and the horned silhouettes of prehistoric bison. Rivers run swift and cold, cutting through forests of spruce and pine, while predators, saber cats, dire wolves, and the short-faced bears stalk the edges of shadow. This was the stage upon which the Clovis people lived. They were nomadic, moving with the seasons, following the great herds that sustained them. Their camps were temporary, marked only by fire pits, discarded bones, and the tools they left behind. Life was not leisurely, was a balance between skill, courage, and caution. One mistake could mean the difference between a successful hunt and starvation. The Clovis spear points, with their elegant fluted design, were the cutting edge of survival technology, crafted from high-quality stone. Each was carefully shaped and thinned so it could be hafted onto a spear and launched with deadly precision. These weapons gave the Clovis an advantage over their prey, allowing them to bring down animals many times their size. Yet their world was not all danger, and death had held moments of beauty, too. Imagine standing in a dawn mist on the plains, hearing the distant rumble of mammoth herds moving like living hills across the horizon. Imagine nights under a sky so crowded with stars, it feels like you could fall upward into them. This was a time when humans were small but resourceful, when every resource bone, hide, stone, sinew was transformed into something useful. And while survival was the first priority, the Clovis left traces that suggest something deeper. Human need to create, to mark the world, to leave behind a signature in stone that would outlast them. But even in this raw, untamed beauty, shadows gathered on the horizon. The ice was melting, the climate was shifting, and somewhere in the spaces between those changes, the seeds of disappearance were already being sown. Before we explore how the Clovis thrived and spread, we must first understand the tools that were their lifeline and the artistic marks that still whisper across millennia. In the scattered remains of Clovis camps, archaeologists have uncovered more than just the stone points that made their name famous. They have found blades, scrapers, gravers, and bone tools, each one shaped with a precision that speaks of both necessity and mastery. These were not crude improvisations, but the products of skilled hands that understood the fracture, lines of stone, the tension of sinew, the weight of a spear in flight. The signature Clovis point, with its distinctive fluting, allowed it to be hafted more securely and penetrated deeply into the hides and muscle of giant prey. But beyond the practical, these tools tell a story of shared knowledge. The same designs appear across vast distances, from New Mexico to Nova Scotia, suggesting either a wide-ranging people or an idea so powerful it traveled faster than the hunters themselves. This consistency hints at more than survival, it speaks to identity. Carrying a Clovis point was like carrying a banner that said, "We are the same people, no matter how far we roam." Alongside the weapons, archaeologists have discovered caches, carefully buried collections of pristine tools, sometimes in places far from known settlements. Were these reserves for future hunts, offerings to unseen powers, or part of a tradition whose meaning has long since faded? Then there are the rarer, more puzzling finds: engraved bones, red ochre stains, beads of shell or ivory. These are not tools of the hunt, but objects of expression, symbols perhaps of status, belief, or remembrance. Some researchers believe these may have been the beginnings of art in the Americas, whispers of a culture aware of something beyond the physical world. Imagine a hunter taking the time to etch a shape into bone when every moment could be spent in the pursuit of food. Such acts suggest that the Clovis people did not simply live in their world, they interpreted it, gave it meaning, passed that meaning from one generation to the next. And yet, for all their ingenuity, their tools would one day be found in places where no Clovis person remained, lying silent in the earth, as if waiting to be claimed again. But before we can face the mystery of their vanishing, we must follow their spread across the continent, tracing how a single cultural spark could ignite in the ice-shadowed north and flare outward into a land as vast as it was unknown. From the windswept plains of the Dakotas to the dense pine forests of New England, the Clovis people moved with a confidence that suggests they knew this land in a way no one had before. They were not bound to one place. Instead, they followed the rhythm of the seasons, the migrations of their prey, and the call of opportunity. Their footprints, if you could see them all at once, would form a sprawling web stretching thousands of miles, crossing rivers that glittered like silver, under the moon and mountains that groaned with the weight of ice. To move across such distances required more than endurance. It demanded knowledge of edible plants, of fresh water sources, of the subtle signs that marked where herds would pass. And yet, the similarity of Clovis tools found thousands of miles apart suggests they carried more than physical goods. They carried stories, instructions, and perhaps even a shared language of craft that bound distant groups together. The land they crossed was not the America we know. It was wilder, colder, filled with creatures now lost to time. Mastodons crashed through snow-dusted forests. Giant ground sloths moved like slow-breathing boulders, and herds of bison blackened the horizon. To thrive here, the Clovis people had to be both predators and strategists, able to read the language of the wind and the whispers of the ground. Some researchers believe their spread was so swift, it might have been completed in a matter of centuries. Others suggest it was slower, a careful, deliberate push into new territory as they balanced risk against reward. Either way, their presence left a quiet signature beneath the soil, a scatter of flakes from a napper's work, a broken spear tip, a charred patch where meat once cooked over an open fire. But as we follow their expansion, questions emerge. Were they a single people expanding outward, or a set of allied groups bound by shared tradition? Did they see themselves as one nation, or was their unity more fragile, more dependent on the hunt and the land's generosity? These questions linger like distant campfire smoke on a still night, fading but never gone. And as their reach grew, so too did the mystery for it. Is at the very height of their spread that we begin to see the first shadows of their disappearance. What could undo a people so skilled, so adaptable, so seemingly unshakable? The answer may lie in the very heart of the world they hunted. The Clovis people were not merely hunters. They were orchestrators of death on a scale that few could match. Picture the scene, a flat expanse of grassland under a sky so wide it seems to swallow the horizon. The air trembling with the low thunder of hooves. Ahead, a herd of mammoths, their massive forms casting long shadows in the late-day sun. The Clovis hunters move with silent coordination, each step calculated, each signal understood without words. They know the terrain, the wind's direction, and the animals' likely escape routes. In their hands, they carry weapons unlike any the world had seen before the Clovis points. Their fluted design allowing for deadly penetration, mounted on long spears meant to be hurled with unerring force. One moment, the herd grazes in relative peace. The next, chaos erupts. Spears flash in the fading light, striking with precision. The air fills with the roars and bellows of wounded giants, the ground shaking beneath their desperate movements. This was not just survival. It was mastery over creatures that had ruled the land for millennia. Every successful hunt meant food, tools, clothing, and shelter for the group. But it also carried risks. One misstep, and the hunter could become the hunted. Around the remains of these kills, archaeologists have found layers of evidence. Bones cracked to reach the marrow, tools discarded after their work was done, even traces of fire pits where meat was roasted under the stars. To stand in one of these ancient kill sites today is to feel the ghost of the huntan echo of shouts, the smell of blood and smoke, the strange mix of triumph and reverence for the fallen beast. Some researchers believe the Clovis' reliance on large game hunting may have been their strength and their undoing. As the climate shifted and the great animals began to vanish, the skills that had defined them might have become a burden rather than a gift. But did they adapt? Did they turn their points toward smaller prey, or seek new ways to live? The evidence is thin, and each discovery seems to lead to another question. What is certain is that for a time, their hunts were a dance with the primal forces of nature, a dance in which every step carried the weight of survival, and every victory edged them closer to the mysteries that would one day erase them from the earth. The Clovis people left behind no written language, no carved chronicles of their rise or fall. Yet their story whispers through the cold perfection of their tools. To hold a Clovis point sleek, symmetrical, and deadly is to understand that these were not crude survivalists, but master craftsmen. The stone itself, often chert or obsidian, was chosen with a discerning eye, sourced from quarries sometimes hundreds of miles away. The crafting process was slow, deliberate, almost meditative. Each flake was struck away with precision, revealing the elegant flute that ran from base toward the tip, a feature that set their weapons apart from anything the ancient world had seen. This fluting allowed the point to be firmly hafted to a spear, creating a weapon capable of piercing the thick hides of mammoths and bison. Around these points, archaeologists have uncovered scrapers for hide preparation, gravers for carving, and blades so sharp they could slice flesh as easily as air. Some caches of tools, buried deep in the earth, appear untouched, carefully wrapped and hidden, as though intended for future use, or perhaps left as offerings to whatever forces they revered. There is an artistry here that transcends necessity. Each tool balances function with form, speaking to a mind that valued beauty as much as efficiency. In the dim light of an excavation tent, when a Clovis point is brushed clean of the soil that has held it for over 13,000 years, it seems to radiate a quiet power, a connection to hands that worked under the open sky with only stone, bone, and determination. Some researchers argue that the uniformity of these tools across such vast distances points to a shared culture, a network of knowledge that stretched across the ancient North American landscape. Others wonder if these tools were more than implements, if they were symbols of identity, status, or even spiritual belief. But the mystery deepens. Why did such an advanced technology vanish almost overnight? Were the last Clovis craftsmen aware they were the end of a lineage, or did they believe their work would endure? The silence of the artifacts offers no answer. Only the cold, sharp edge of a blade that has waited millennia for someone to ask the right question. Beneath layers of soil and centuries of silence, archaeologists have stumbled upon what can only be described as time capsules, Clovis caches. These buried collections of tools and weapon points are unlike ordinary scatterings of artifacts left behind at living sites. They are deliberate, precise, and often untouched since the moment they were placed in the ground. In some cases, they contain dozens of carefully crafted spear points, each perfect in form, alongside blades, scrapers, and cores of unshaped stone, as though the maker intended to return for them but never did. The placement is often strange, sometimes deep enough to suggest they were meant to be hidden from both predators and other humans. Were these storage pits meant to sustain hunters returning to a seasonal hunting ground, or were they offerings laid down in ritual for reasons now lost to time? The gold site in Texas, the East Wenatchee cache in Washington, the Fen cache spanning Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, each one carries an echo of intention, a sense that these were not abandoned by accident. Some caches hold raw materials from far-off lands, evidence of journeys and trade networks that stretched over vast distances. In others, the tools seem too pristine, unused, as if they were ceremonial objects never meant to touch the flesh of prey. When scientists remove these artifacts from their burial, they are often struck by the feeling that they are intruding, breaking into a vault sealed by minds we cannot understand. The soil clinging to the edges seems to carry a weight heavier than time, a quiet insistence that these objects were meant to remain where they lay. What's more, the sheer consistency and craftsmanship across caches found hundreds of miles apart hints at a unified cultural thread, a shared knowledge passed down and guarded. Some theorize these caches were survival strategies in a world where failure to hunt meant death. Others believe they may have been markers of territory or spiritual deposits meant to ensure success in future hunts. Yet, as with all things Clovis, certainty is a luxury we do not have. Each cache uncovered raises as many questions as it answers. Who placed them there? Did they ever plan to return? And if they didn't, what happened in the moments before? They walked away from the tools that could have kept them alive. To understand the Clovis people, one must walk silently beside them in the mind's eye through windswept plains, over frost-crusted grass, toward the silhouettes of creatures that no longer walk the earth. Their prey was not the timid deer, or fleet-footed antelope of today, but giants, mammoths with tusks like the sweep of crescent moons, mastodons built like living fortresses, and bison so large they could crush a man without noticing. Hunting these beasts was not a matter of chance, it was a calculated dance of patience, skill, and courage. The Clovis spear point, fluted and razor-edged, was more than a weapon. It was the key to survival, carved from stone with such precision that modern flint knappers still marvel at its craftsmanship. It could pierce thick hide and deliver a killing blow where it mattered most. But these hunts were not solitary. Imagine a small band moving in near silence, communicating with the slightest gesture, positioning themselves with the wind in their favor, waiting for the moment when muscle and instinct would meet in a single strike. Sometimes they drove their quarry toward marshy ground, where movement was slow and the kill more certain. Other times they approached from multiple sides, using the terrain as a trap. Every part of the animal was used: meat smoked over fires for the long months ahead, hides turned into shelter, bones shaped into tools, sinew stretched into cordage. Yet there was a cost. These hunts were dangerous beyond measure. One wrong move, and the hunter became the hunted. The air during a kill must have been thick with the scent of blood and earth. The sound of stamping hooves like thunder, the cries of victory or anguish carrying across the plains. Some researchers suggest that such hunting prowess may have contributed to the decline of these massive animals, though others argue climate change had already set their fate in motion. Still, the image remains of a people whose lives were defined by their ability to take down giants, whose skill at the hunt was as much art as necessity. And here lies the enduring mystery. If they could master such challenges, survive such harsh landscapes, and thrive in a world of predators and prey, what force was powerful enough to bring the Clovis to their end? Beneath the quiet soils of North America, hidden under layers of sediment, ice, and time, lie the frozen whispers of the Clovis past. It is here beneath riverbanks, in eroded gullies, and along the margins of ancient lakes that archaeologists have unearthed the delicate evidence of a vanished people. Spear points still sharp enough to draw blood. Charred bone fragments that speak of campfires extinguished thousands of years ago. Even the preserved impressions of tools once gripped. In human hands, each discovery is like a faint heartbeat, reminding us that they were here, they lived, they worked, they dreamed. But these clues are fragile, and time conspires to erase them. Many artifacts are buried beneath permafrost, their preservation, a twist of fate that locks them away until a warming earth or the hand of a digger sets them free. In some places, mammoth bones lie where they fell, gnawed by scavengers and marked by human blades, a frozen crime scene from the Ice Age. Elsewhere, caches of unused spear points, buried as if in haste or ceremony, suggest moments of sudden departure or rituals we cannot fully decipher. The texture of these objects tells a story without words. The smooth polish of a tool used over years. The jagged edge of a flake struck away in a single, decisive blow. The soil itself is a storyteller, holding traces of pollen that revealed the plants they lived among, and ash layers that hint at sudden, devastating fires. Some researchers believe that a cataclysm, perhaps a cosmic impactma, have scattered microscopic debris across the continent, now locked in the earth as silent witnesses. Others point to gradual shifts in climate, etched into the sediment, like slow-motion records of a dying world. Yet even with these clues, the picture remains incomplete, as if the land itself has conspired to guard their final chapter. And that is where the intrigue deepens. How many more answers lie just inches beneath our feet, waiting to be found? How many stories of the Clovis remain sealed in the ground, overlooked by those who walk above them every day, unaware that they tread upon the bones of giants and the tools of the first Americans? The soil remembers, but will we listen before those memories are gone forever? Despite their skill, innovation, and adaptability, the Clovis people vanished, leaving behind only the silent testimony of tools and campsites. Archaeologists have long puzzled over this sudden disappearance, which seems almost paradoxical for a culture so capable of surviving the harsh Ice Age world. Some researchers suggest that the decline of megafauna, the mammoths, mastodons, and giant bison that had sustained them, may have triggered a crisis too severe to overcome. With their primary sources of food gone, the Clovis were forced to adapt to smaller prey and harsher landscapes, a shift that may have undermined the social and cultural networks that had held them together. Others propose that dramatic climate shifts, including the onset of the Younger Dryas, brought a rapid cooling that reshaped rivers, forests, and plains, making once familiar hunting grounds unpredictable and dangerous. There are even whispers of disease or conflict factors that leave almost no trace in the archaeological record but could decimate small, scattered populations. What complicates the puzzle further is the evidence of continuity. Some regional cultures, like the Folsom tradition, appear shortly after the Clovis, using similar tools but showing regional variation. Did these groups descend directly from the Clovis, adapting their ways in response to environmental pressures? Or were they entirely new populations filling a vacuum left by a vanished culture? The Clovis genome offers tantalizing hints, but no definitive answers. The young boy Anzaquan, buried with hundreds of tools, is genetically linked to modern indigenous peoples of Central and South America, suggesting that the disappearance of Clovis culture does not equate to the disappearance of their people entirely. Their lineage may have persisted, dispersed, and transformed, leaving only fragments of the original culture behind. Still, the abruptness with which their hallmark points and distinctive caches vanish from the record continues to haunt archaeologists. Was this extinction a slow erosion over centuries, or a sudden unraveling of society? Did they sense the end approaching, or did it arrive as unexpectedly as a predator from the shadows? The answers remain elusive, like echoes in a canyon. And as we ponder the final days of the Clovis, we are left with a question that reverberates. Across millennia, how does a people so skilled, so innovative, and so deeply in tune with their world simply disappear, leaving the land itself as the only witness to their fading footsteps? Imagine standing at the southern margin of a vast ice sheet, the Laurentide Glacier stretching northward like a frozen ocean, its jagged edge groaning as it presses against the land. This is the world the Clovis people inhabited, a landscape of extremes where survival demanded ingenuity at every turn. Rivers carved deep channels through tundra and forest, carrying glacial melt that shimmered like quicksilver under a pale sun. Winds swept across open plains with enough force to chill the bone, and snow could arrive suddenly, coating tracks and hiding predators. Yet it was here, at the edge of this icy expanse, that the Clovis thrived, moving with a mastery born of intimate knowledge of the land. Their campsites were carefully chosen, often near stone outcrops that supplied raw material for tools, or along riverbanks that attracted the megafauna they hunted. Hearths glowed with warmth, and shelters, crafted from hides and wood, offered protection from storms that could last for days. In these settings, the Clovis were high-technology foragers, capable of maintaining access to food, water, and materials across hundreds of kilometers. The very stones they shaped into fluted points were often quarried from distant sources, evidence of long journeys and sophisticated planning. Bone needles suggest they stitched clothes from the pelts of foxes, jackrabbits, and even larger predators, creating garments capable of withstanding the cold. Yet the landscape was unforgiving. Predators stalked the same rivers and plains, and hunting a mammoth required not just skill but cooperation, strategy, and courage. Some researchers believe that the extremity of this environment shaped the Clovis' social networks, forcing groups to communicate, trade, and share knowledge over vast distances to survive. Others suggest that these challenges fostered a culture deeply connected to the land, attuned to its subtle shifts and dangers. And yet, for all their expertise, the edge of the ice held secrets and pressures beyond their control, shifting climates, vanishing prey, and possibly new populations moving into their territory. As we imagine their life at this frozen frontier, one question hangs in the air, as cold and sharp as the wind that once swept these plains. Could a people so adept at mastering their environment also be powerless against the slow, relentless forces that would ultimately erase their culture from the map of history? The Clovis people lived in a world dominated by creatures that dwarfed modern imagination. Their diet, carefully reconstructed from archaeological and isotopic evidence, reveals a reliance on the largest animals North America had ever seen. Mammoths were the centerpiece, towering beasts with thick hides and ivory tusks, providing meat, fat bones, and hides in abundance. Bison, with their enormous herds, offered both sustenance and tools, while smaller game like jackrabbits, tortoises, and waterfowl supplemented the diet, ensuring diversity in a world of extremes. Evidence from the burial of Anzaquan, the young Clovis boy, suggests that mammoths contributed up to 35 to 40% of his group's diet, alongside elk and probable bison, with smaller animals representing only a minor fraction. These were not casual hunts. Each kill required planning, teamwork, and an understanding of behavior, migration patterns, and seasonal cycles. The butchering sites reveal a meticulous process. Bones cracked to extract marrow, meat dried or smoked for future use, hides carefully removed and processed into clothing or shelter. Plants played a lesser but still important role. Fruits, nuts, and edible roots provided nutrients with minimal processing, though evidence of extensive agriculture or storage is absent. Some researchers suggest that the reliance on large game may have contributed to the vulnerability of Clovis society, leaving them exposed when the megafauna began to decline. Others argue that their diet shows flexibility and ingenuity, a capacity to survive on what the land offered, however unpredictable. Imagine standing at a kill site, the air rich with the scent of smoke and blood, the ground littered with tools and bones, the distant mountains, silent witnesses to a cycle repeated countless times. The richness of their diet speaks to a people intimately connected to their environment, attuned to the rhythms of prey and predator alike. And yet, as we reconstruct what they ate and how they hunted, the central question lingers. If they mastered the consumption of giants, why did they vanish? Was it overhunting, environmental upheaval, disease, or a combination of factors too complex to disentangle even today? The answer remains buried in the earth, alongside the bones of creatures that once ruled the continent and the vanished footsteps of a people who fed on them. The Clovis people were never rooted in one place. For long, their lives unfolded across a landscape that demanded constant movement, guided by the rhythm of the seasons and the migrations of their prey. Archaeologists have identified campsites on the peripheries of the southern plains and other regions, often strategically positioned near sources of workable stone or along migratory routes of bison and mammoths. These camps were not permanent villages, but temporary hubs, places where families or bands could gather, repair tools, share resources, and perhaps even exchange news or stories with neighboring groups. Some sites suggest social gatherings of remarkable scale, where multiple bands might converge for hunting, rituals, or seasonal ceremonies. Imagine a sprawling open-air encampment, fires dotting the landscape like stars, the air filled with the low murmur of voices, the scent of smoke, cooked meat, and the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil. Tools would be sharpened and repaired, hides stretched and sewn with bone needles, and children learning the delicate art of survival from elders. These campsites reveal a sophisticated understanding of both geography and ecology, allowing the Clovis to exploit the land efficiently, while maintaining mobility. Sites like Jake Bluff in Oklahoma show extraordinary planning, Hunters drove entire bison herds into natural traps, utilizing steep-sided arroyos to contain and slaughter dozens of animals at once. Such coordinated efforts indicate communication, leadership, and an intimate knowledge of terrain that could only be gained through generations of observation and practice. The seasonal nature of these camps also meant that the Clovis people were constantly negotiating the changing environment. Rivers swelling with meltwater, plains turning brown and barren in winter, forests providing shelter and game in summer. Yet, despite this ingenuity, these movements may have also made them vulnerable. Rapid climate changes, dwindling megafauna, and possible competition with other human groups could have disrupted these delicate patterns. And as we imagine the Clovis moving with the seasons, setting up camp after camp, the lingering question emerges: did these migrations become increasingly desperate in the final centuries, as the land they had mastered began to change in ways they could not control? The answer, obscured by time, remains just out of reach, hidden among the soil and stone of these ancient, transient homes. In the hands of the Clovis people, stone became more than rock, it was life itself. Every edge, every flake, every carefully shaped point had a purpose, forged through skill and repeated effort. The hallmark Clovis point, bifacial and fluted, was designed for piercing, slicing, and sometimes throwing, yet these were not mere weapons, they were multifunctional instruments of survival. Each point could have been hafted to a wooden spear with bone rods and sinew, a combination that allowed hunters to take down creatures far larger than themselves. Blades and biffices, struck from carefully prepared cores, provided cutting surfaces for butchering meat, scraping hides, and crafting other tools. Even the smaller, more delicate implements carried importance: ADSS for shaping wood, beveled rods for hafting, and bone points for hunting smaller prey. Every tool reflects a mind attuned to efficiency, anticipating the unpredictability of hunting or the harshness of the Ice Age environment. Interestingly, Clovis tools were sometimes carried over hundreds of kilometers, evidence of long-distance planning and extensive cultural networks. Some artifacts were resharpened, though not endlessly, revealing a balance between utility and creation. Caches of tools, deliberately buried, suggest foresight, ritual, or both an awareness that survival demanded preparation for unknown circumstances. Researchers have long debated whether certain design features, like overshot flaking, were purely functional or symbolic, hinting at aesthetic sensibilities hidden within practical necessity. In essence, the toolkit of the Clovis was a tangible extension of their minds, a bridge between ingenuity and the raw challenges of the natural world. Each stone edge carries a whisper of thought, of careful planning, of the tactile experience, of shaping a rock into a weapon capable of taking down a mammoth. Yet, even with such mastery over their tools, the Clovis were not immune to the forces around them. As the megafauna declined, as rivers shifted and forests changed, the very instruments that had defined their success may have been insufficient to secure their survival. And so, with every carefully struck flake and polished edge, we are reminded, a people capable of such technical brilliance could still vanish, leaving behind only the silent echoes of stones waiting to tell their story. Among the many tools left behind by the Clovis, none is as iconic or as mysterious as the Clovis point itself. These carefully fluted, bifacial stone points, sometimes exceeding 10 centimeters in length, were more than practical implements. They were a signature of a culture that thrived tens of thousands of years ago. Each point begins as a nodule of siliceous rock, shaped through percussion and pressure, flaking into a sharp aerodynamic form, capable of piercing thick hides and cutting with precision. The fluting, the elongated groove, struck from the base toward the tip remains one of the most puzzling features. Some suggest it was functional, reducing stress on hafting, absorbing impact, or easing attachment to a spear. Others propose it was stylistic, a mark of identity, or even a form of ritual expression, a hidden signature of the maker. Worn edges and microscopic, where patterns reveal a surprising versatility. Points were not just for hunting megafauna, but also for slicing, cutting, and general utility. In some cases, Clovis points were resharpened, a testament to the value of these objects and the labor invested in their creation. The distribution of Clovis points is equally remarkable, found across thousands of kilometers of North America. From the southern plains to the northern reaches, they hint at mobility, trade, or cultural diffusion. Some points were cached in hidden locations, perhaps to be retrieved later or offered as part of ceremonial practices. The very effort invested in their creation, the precision required, and the consistency of design across the continent suggest a culture with shared knowledge, skills transmitted across generations, and an aesthetic sensibility alongside practicality. Yet, for all their sophistication, Clovis points vanish from the record with the decline of the culture. Where once these edges pierced the hides of mammoths and bison, now only fragments remain, silent witnesses to a vanished people. And the question lingers, almost like a shadow stretching across the millennia. If a culture capable of such technical mastery and artistic precision could disappear, what force, environmental or social, could erase them so completely, leaving only stones and whispers behind? The Clovis point endures, a symbol of ingenuity, and a haunting relic of a civilization lost to time. Beyond the famed Clovis points, the Clovis toolkit reveals a depth of sophistication that speaks to both ingenuity and adaptability. Long blades, struck from carefully prepared cores, were designed for precision cutting, scraping hides, and creating other tools, doubling as instruments of survival and artful craftsmanship. Bifaces, often large and versatile, served multiple roles as cutting implements, as preforms for points, or as portable sources of flakes useful in countless tasks. Each edge, each shape, was not arbitrary. It reflected careful planning, an intimate understanding of stone properties, and a vision of the tool's potential life. Yet stone was not the only medium. Bone tools, including beveled rods and shaft straighteners, suggest a culture capable of manipulating diverse materials with skill and intention. The rods, sometimes beveled on both ends, may have acted as foreshafts for spear points, or even served entirely different, enigmatic functions. Ivory and antler were also incorporated, creating points or rods, hinting at resourcefulness and possibly ritual significance. These tools were not merely functional, they were extensions of the Clovis mind, bridging the gap between human thought and the environment. Experimental reconstructions reveal how these implements might have been hafted, revealing an astonishing knowledge of mechanics, leverage, and durability. And yet, the presence of caches hidden collections of points, blades, and bifaces adds another layer of mystery. Were these simply practical stockpiles for future use, or did they serve ceremonial or symbolic purposes, marking sacred spaces or signaling knowledge to future generations? Every tool carries whispers of lives lived under constant challenge, where survival depended on the ability to strike, carve, and adapt with precision. And as we consider these artifacts, each shaped by countless strikes and hours of effort, the question persists. Could a culture so finely attuned to its tools, an environment still be swept from existence? The stones, bones, and ivory remain, their silent edges cutting through time, offering glimpses of a civilization that once thrived yet disappeared, leaving only fragments to hint at its genius. One of the most enigmatic aspects of the Clovis culture is their practice of deliberately placing collections of tools, points, and bifaces in carefully chosen locations, only to leave them for future retrieval. Over 20 such caches have been identified across North America, yet their purpose remains shrouded in mystery. Some researchers propose a practical explanation. These caches acted as emergency supplies, allowing mobile groups to access tools during long journeys or hunts far from home. Others suggest a ritualistic or symbolic function, perhaps marking territory, sacred spaces, or signaling messages to other groups. The act of burying tools imbued them with a silent significance, an intention communicated not through words, but through placement and preservation. Imagine a quiet riverbank, the earth undisturbed for centuries, concealing points and blades that once defined survival. The meticulous arrangement of these artifacts hints at foresight, planning, and a deep understanding of both landscape and human behavior. In some cases, caches contained items made from distant sources, revealing connections that spanned hundreds of kilometers, testament to the social and cultural networks that bound Clovis groups across vast distances. These hidden legacies provide a rare glimpse into the minds of a people otherwise known only through their material culture. Yet they also raise profound questions. Were these caches purely practical, or did they carry meanings lost to time? Did the Clovis see their tools as sacred extensions of themselves, or simply as instruments of necessity? And when the culture vanished, were these caches ever retrieved, or did they remain undisturbed, silent witnesses to a world that no longer existed? Each discovery adds both clarity and enigma, allowing us to touch the past while deepening the sense of mystery. As we ponder these hidden stashes of human ingenuity, we are confronted by a striking thought. The Clovis carefully preserved their tools, planning for a future they themselves could not foresee, leaving behind secrets that continue to echo across millennia, challenging our understanding of survival, ritual, and the fragile persistence of culture. Amidst the practical tools and flaked stones of the Clovis people lies a quieter, more elusive legacy, evidence of artistic expression and ritual thought. Though rare, artifacts hint at a culture that engaged not only with survival but with creativity, symbolism, and perhaps even spiritual practice. At the Gault site in Texas, limestone nodules bear intricate incised patterns, some geometric, others mimicking the veins of leaves, carved with a precision that suggests intentionality far beyond mere decoration. Red ochre, a pigment carried sometimes over 100 kilometers from its source, appears on objects, caches, and even in burials, hinting at symbolic or ritual significance. Some researchers propose that OKRs use marked objects for ceremonial purposes, acted as protection, or signaled a connection to ancestors or the spiritual world. Small beads fashioned from bones may have adorned clothing or bodies, each a subtle sign of identity, status, or belief. These traces suggest that the Clovis were more than hunters. They were thinkers, observers of the world, capable of abstract thought and the creation of meaning beyond the immediate necessities of life. And yet, these glimpses are fleeting, tantalizing in their scarcity, leaving more questions than answers. Were these items part of daily ritual, expressions of status, or did they mark moments of transition, birth, death, or coming of age? The careful placement of objects in caches and burials suggests intentionality, a desire to leave a message, a legacy, or an offering to forces unseen. As we imagine the Clovis people handling these objects, the tactile sensation of polished stone against skin, the vivid red of ochre staining hands and tools, a picture emerges of a culture that wove art and survival together. The same hands that shaped a fluted point for hunting also etched delicate patterns in stone, connecting the physical and the symbolic in ways we may never fully comprehend. And as we consider these artistic traces, one question persists, lingering, like the scent of smoke from an ancient fire. Did these creative acts carry power? Did they serve to anchor a people in the face of an uncertain world? Or were they whispers of a culture on the brink, echoing into the silence that would follow their disappearance? The Clovis people existed in a world dominated by giants, Columbian mammoths, mastodons, gomphotheres, and enormous bison roamed the plains and forests, shaping both the environment and the lives of those who hunted them. These animals were not mere prey. They defined the Clovis way of life, dictating migration patterns, settlement locations, and even tool design. Mammoths provided meat to sustain large groups, hides for clothing and shelter, and bones that could be fashioned into tools and implements. Bison herds, vast and seemingly endless, offered not only sustenance but opportunities for collective hunting strategies that reveal remarkable planning and coordination. Sites like Jake Bluff in Oklahoma demonstrate the sophisticated techniques employed by Clovis hunters. Herds were driven into natural traps, such as arroyos, where hunters could kill dozens of animals with a combination of spears, teamwork, and knowledge of animal behavior. Yet, the relationship between Clovis people and megafauna was complex, raising questions that have challenged researchers for decades. Some suggest that overhunting by Clovis groups contributed to the extinction of these giants, a theory known as the overkill hypothesis, while others argue that climate change, habitat shifts, and ecological pressures played a greater role. Perhaps it was a combination, a perfect storm in which even the ingenuity of the Clovis could not avert catastrophe. The disappearance of these megafauna would have reverberated through every aspect of Clovis life suddenly. The animals that had sustained, clothed, and equipped them were gone, forcing rapid adaptation or migration. Imagine standing on a cold, windswept plain, the distant rumble of a mammoth herd approaching, the anticipation and fear palpable, knowing that survival depended on skill, courage, and coordination. And then imagine that world shrinking, the giants vanishing, leaving only traces in the soil and bones scattered across ancient kill sites. This intimate, yet precarious bond between humans and megafauna casts a shadow over the Clovis story, hinting at one of the possible forces behind their mysterious disappearance. With the giants gone, could a culture so dependent on them endure? Or did the loss of these colossal creatures mark the beginning of the end, a slow unraveling that would leave behind only stone, bone, and questions whispered across millennia? Life for the Clovis people revolved around a careful balance of risk, skill, and opportunity. Their diet, heavily reliant on megafauna, was supplemented by smaller game and plants, creating a complex subsistence strategy adapted to the variable climates of the late Pleistocene. Isotopic analysis of the young Anzacuan burial from Montana reveals a diet dominated by mammoth, with significant contributions from elk and bison, and minor portions of smaller animals, illustrating both the centrality of large prey and the inclusion of opportunistic sources. Plant remains, primarily fruits and easily gathered resources, suggest a minimal investment in processing, reflecting perhaps the high mobility of Clovis bands, always on the move to follow game or seek fresh water. Bone needles found at sites such as La Prele in Wyoming hint at the production of tailored clothing from animal hides, adapted to harsh winters, while evidence of fire pits, butchered bones, and tool repair points to a daily rhythm structured around survival, social cohesion, and the maintenance of essential skills. The Clovis lifestyle required intricate knowledge of the landscape. Water sources, migratory paths, and shelter locations were all mapped mentally, guiding seasonal movements and hunting strategies. Imagine walking through a sweeping valley, the crunch of frost underfoot, the distant lowing of bison echoing against canyon walls, and the Clovis hunters preparing weapons, checking snares, and sharing knowledge across generations. Small game, like jackrabbits and tortoises, supplemented the diet, while strategic hunting of larger animals demanded cooperation, patience, and precision. Every meal, every preparation, every tool repair was an act of survival and culture intertwined. Yet, even with careful planning, the Clovis faced an unpredictable world, shifting climates, dwindling prey, and competition from other groups. Their daily lives, once so effective, became increasingly precarious as the Pleistocene ended. And as we envision these communities, moving, hunting, and gathering, one question lingers. How does a society so skilled at sustaining itself in a harsh, changing environment suddenly vanish, leaving behind only whispers in the bones, tools, and fleeting traces of a vanished people? The answer, obscured by time, remains one of North America's deepest mysteries. The Clovis people were not bound to a single place. Their lives were defined by movement, following the pulse of the land, and the migrations of the creatures upon which they depended. Sites scattered across North America, from southern Canada to northern Mexico, reveal that Clovis groups traversed vast distances, sometimes transporting tools hundreds of kilometers from the original source of the stone. This extraordinary mobility suggests not only practical survival strategies, but also an intricate knowledge of geography, seasonal patterns, and resource distribution. Imagine the rolling plains, icy rivers, and dense forests stretching endlessly, while Clovis bands navigated with keen eyes, tracking bison herds or mammoth footprints, knowing where water pooled after winter thaws, and choosing campsites near stone outcrops for tool-making. In the southern plains, large seasonal camps may have served as staging grounds, places where multiple groups converged for social exchange, tool production, or coordinated hunts. In contrast, smaller, more transient sites suggest rapid movement across the landscape, driven by the demands of resource availability or environmental change. This combination of long-distance travel and localized settlement created a networked culture, linking disparate groups through shared technologies, strategies, and possibly even ritual practices. Some Clovis tools were found far from their original stone sources, indicating not only mobility, but perhaps trade, exchange, or knowledge transfer across vast regions. Yet, with such movement came vulnerability, reliance on predictable migrations, key water sources, and megafauna meant that any disruption, climatic shifts, habitat loss, or declining prey populations could have dramatic consequences. The very flexibility that allowed Clovis people to thrive might have been stretched to its limit as the Pleistocene world changed. And so we are left to ponder, how does a society so adept at traversing and understanding a vast continent, capable of sustaining itself across hundreds of kilometers, suddenly fragment and disappear, leaving behind only scattered sites, enigmatic tools, and tantalizing traces of life once vibrant across the Americas? The pathways they once walked have long since vanished, leaving echoes of footsteps frozen in time, whispering secrets that we are only beginning to hear. For decades, scholars have debated the origins of the Clovis people, envisioning the icy landscapes of North America as both barrier and gateway. One prevailing theory posited the ice-free corridor, a stretch of land between the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets, as the path by which ancient peoples migrated from Beringia into the interior of the continent. This corridor, opening and closing with shifting glaciers, would have allowed groups to move southward, following herds of megafauna and establishing the earliest widespread culture recognizable in North America. Yet, more recent research suggests this picture may be incomplete. Evidence from sites such as Monte Verde in Chile, Paisley Caves in Oregon, and Cooper's Ferry in Idaho predates Clovis, implying that human presence in the Americas existed long before the corridor fully opened. Some researchers now suggest a Pacific coastal route, navigating rivers, estuaries, and shorelines, providing both passage and sustenance. This route, hidden from view beneath waves and sediments, may have allowed populations to migrate and spread, gradually, carrying technologies like fluted points along the way. Genetic studies, particularly those examining the Ansequan burial, further complicate the picture, indicating that the Clovis people were closely related to Siberian populations, but also ancestral to later indigenous peoples across Central and South America. Their arrival and expansion, therefore, may not have been a single event, but a series of movements, adaptations, and cultural transmissions over generations. Imagine the icy wind biting at a group's faces as they traverse newly exposed tundra, or the salt spray of a rugged coastline marking their passage. Each step a negotiation with an unforgiving environment. The fluted points, caches, and bones left behind hint at these journeys, yet they also leave us with profound uncertainty. If Clovis was only one chapter in a longer story of migration, how much of their disappearance was simply absorption into later populations, adaptation to changing landscapes, or extinction due to environmental pressures? The pathways they traveled are invisible today, yet they echo across time, a silent network of movement, survival, and mystery that challenges every certainty about how and why the first Americans spread across the vast continent, while Clovis technology spread across much of North America. It was not alone. In the West, the Clovis tradition overlapped with the Western stemmed tradition, a culture producing unfluted projectile points with its own distinctive style and toolkit. These contemporaneous groups raise intriguing questions about interaction, competition, and knowledge transfer. Did Clovis hunters encounter Western stemmed bands at seasonal camps or along migratory corridors? Could there have been exchanges of ideas, tools, or hunting strategies? Or were these cultures strictly isolated, following parallel paths in a shared landscape? Evidence of overlapping sites suggests that coexistence was possible, yet the precise nature of these interactions remains uncertain. The technological differences, Clovis fluted points, versus unfluted Western-stemmed. Tools highlight distinct approaches to problem-solving and adaptation, hinting at separate cultural identities and traditions. Beyond technology, differences in mobility patterns, camp structures, and resource use may have marked each culture's unique adaptation to the environment. But the scarcity of overlapping material culture leaves these inferences largely speculative. It is also plausible that Clovis technology was adopted selectively by other groups, influencing subsequent traditions across North America. The ephemeral nature of these cultural encounters amplifies the mystery. Fleeting interactions leave minimal traces, yet each point and bifus becomes a testament to possible exchange, conflict, or coexistence. Imagine two groups converging at a river bend, their fires glowing in the dusk, each observing the other's techniques and tools, perhaps wary, perhaps curious. The land itself, rugged and vast, allowed for both separation and connection, shaping human behavior in subtle ways that we can only attempt to reconstruct. And as the Clovis culture faded, replaced or absorbed by regional point styles like Folsom, Cumberland, or Gainey points, the question lingers: did these overlaps contribute to Clovis transformation, or did environmental and subsistence pressures alone seal their fate? The answer, like so much of Clovis history, remains tantalizingly out of reach, leaving only artifacts and traces to whisper hints of encounters long vanished into the prehistoric night. The Clovis people were artisans as much as they were hunters, their skill with stone shaping bordering on the extraordinary. At the heart of their ingenuity lies the Clovis point, a bifacially fluted projectile designed with precision, flaking, removed with a combination of percussion and pressure techniques that required both patience and foresight. Some points exceed 10 centimeters in length, crafted from nodules or siliceous rocks that might have been carried hundreds of kilometers from their source, reflecting both the technical sophistication and mobility of their makers. But fluting was not merely a practical act. It remains one of the great enigmas of Clovis craftsmanship. Did it strengthen the point, absorb the shock of impact, or facilitate hafting onto spears and shafts? Or was it a stylistic choice, a signature of identity or mastery? Beyond points, Clovis blades, bifuses, ADSs, and beveled bone rods demonstrate an entire repertoire of tools adapted for cutting, scraping, woodworking, and hunting, each shaped with intent and care. Even the caches discovered across North America, deliberately stored collections of tools, hint at strategic thinking, preparing for the future in a world where survival could hinge on access to a few critical implements. Visualize the process: hands coated in dust, stone striking stone, sparks flying as flakes are removed, each blow calculated, shaping an object that must endure both the rigor of daily use and the unpredictable forces of hunting large game. The Clovis people lived intimately with these tools, each one a lifeline and a testament to human ingenuity. And yet, even with such mastery, the question remains: could these tools, so finely honed, protect a culture from extinction? Could the skill of one generation withstand environmental upheaval, the disappearance of megafauna, and the pressures of an evolving landscape? The stones speak silently across millennia, hinting at genius, necessity, and ritual, but never revealing the full story of the hands that shaped them or the people who depended on them for life itself. One of the most intriguing behaviors of the Clovis people is their practice of catching dill, deliberately placing tools, points, and bifuses in specific locations, sometimes in groups, seemingly for later retrieval. Over 20 such caches have been discovered across North America, often containing finely crafted Clovis points, blades, and occasionally bone implements, all carefully arranged. The purpose of these caches has been debated. Some scholars suggest a practical explanation, a method of storing valuable tools for future use during migrations or hunting expeditions. Others propose ritualistic or symbolic meanings, hinting at ceremonies, offerings, or connections to spiritual beliefs that remain largely invisible to us. The very act of leaving a cache implies foresight, planning, and a relationship with the landscape that is far more intricate than simple survival. Imagine a hunter traveling hundreds of kilometers from a stone source, leaving behind a small cache in a hidden grove or beside a stream, marking it in memory or with subtle cues, intending to return. Each cache becomes a silent time capsule, freezing in place both the technology and the intention of its makers. The inclusion of red ochre, occasionally found staining these objects, adds another layer of mystery. Was it protective, symbolic, or purely aesthetic? And yet, despite the deliberate nature of these deposits, not all caches were ever retrieved, suggesting that some were abandoned, lost, or forgotten. As archaeologists uncover these hidden troves, the patterns reveal networks of movement, resource management, and perhaps even communication across space. Every cache raises questions. Were they practical stores of survival, messages to other groups, or rituals meant to anchor the spirit of the tools? And most hauntingly, what do these abandoned stores say about a culture that would vanish, leaving behind only carefully curated fragments of its existence? The caches, silent and still, echo with the intentions of a people who lived tens of thousands of years ago, leaving clues to their planning, their art, and their mysterious disappearance, whispering questions that remain unanswered even today. Amid the utilitarian tools and hunting implements, traces of artistic expression hint at a deeper, more symbolic side of the Clovis people. At sites like Galt in Texas, archaeologists have discovered limestone nodules engraved with geometric patterns, some evoking leaf motifs, suggesting a capacity for abstraction and aesthetic intent. Such artifacts raise questions about the mental and cultural life of these early Americans. Were these simple decorations, or did they carry symbolic or ritualistic meaning, perhaps linked to beliefs about hunting success, survival, or ancestral spirits? Red ochre, a pigment used extensively by Clovis peoples, appears on tools, burials, and caches, sometimes transported over extraordinary distances, exceeding 100 kilometers from the source. The presence of ochre implies deliberate action, whether for marking important items, ceremonial purposes, or even personal adornment. One can imagine a hunter dipping a tool into deep red pigment before setting out on a hunt, infusing it with both practicality and meaning. A silent ritual connecting human effort to the life of the animals they pursued. Beads fashioned from bones also hint at personal or communal decoration, yet the scarcity of such objects leaves room for speculation. These artistic traces suggest that the Clovis world was not solely about survival. There existed a layer of symbolic thought, a recognition of beauty, or perhaps a need to assert identity or social cohesion. The act of carving patterns into stone or coating tools and caches with ochre imbues ordinary objects with significance, transforming them into vessels of memory, status, or ritual. Yet, the meaning remains elusive. Were these expressions shared across groups or unique to specific bands? Were they part of a spoken narrative, now lost to time, or silent gestures understood only within the context of the community? And as we hold these objects in our minds, polished, fluted, and stained in red, we confront the profound mystery. In a culture so focused on survival, how did they find space for art, symbolism, and ritual? These small remnants whisper across millennia, offering glimpses into a society whose thoughts, beliefs, and emotions are largely erased, leaving only tantalizing hints of a world both practical and deeply enigmatic. The Clovis people, though highly mobile and seemingly scattered across vast landscapes, likely maintained complex social networks that extended across hundreds of kilometers. Seasonal camps, some of considerable size, suggest gatherings where multiple bands might converge, exchanging knowledge, resources, and perhaps even ritual practices. In the southern plains, large campsites positioned near stone sources or water indicate strategic planning, both for survival and for communal interaction. Imagine groups converging at a riverbank, fires flickering in the dusk, the chatter of voices, the rhythmic strike of stone on stone as tools are sharpened or repaired. These gatherings may have served not only practical purposes, hunting coordination, sharing of hides, or replenishing caches, but also social and ceremonial roles, reinforcing bonds and passing knowledge to the next generation. The burial of Anziquan, a young boy interred with over 100 artifacts stained in red ochre, underscores the care invested in individual lives and hints at ritualistic or familial structures that valued the young and the dead. Yet, beyond these glimpses, the internal social hierarchies of Clovis bands remain speculative. Were decisions made collectively? Or did certain individuals lead hunts, allocate resources, or oversee ritual activities? Did skill with flint knapping or hunting elevate status within the group, or were roles more fluid and situational? The cooperative hunting of megafauna like mammoths, requiring precise coordination and division of labor, implies organized communication, trust, and mutual dependence. Even in their daily survival, from tool maintenance to tracking game, social cooperation was vital. And yet, this social cohesion, which once enabled Clovis groups to thrive across a continent, could not prevent their eventual disappearance. Did social networks fracture under environmental stress, declining megafauna, or the pressures of migration and changing climates? Or did they dissolve gradually, absorbed into emerging regional cultures like Folsom and Cumberland, leaving only faint traces of memory and material behind? As we envision these camps, the bustling yet transient pulse of Clovis's life, the question lingers: what invisible threads connected these people, and how did those threads unravel in a world that would soon move beyond their presence? The answers, like their footprints across the landscape, are elusive, whispering through the dust, tools, and ochre-stained bones they left behind. The Clovis people were masters of survival, their existence intertwined with the colossal creatures of the Pleistocene epoch. Mammoths, mastodons, bison, and ancient horses were not merely prey, but central to their diet, culture, and perhaps even spiritual imagination. Sites reveal evidence of systematic hunting and butchering, including the Jake Bluff site in Oklahoma, where dozens of bison antiquus were trapped in a natural arroyo and methodically slaughtered. A vivid testament to both ingenuity and cooperation. Isotopic analysis of the Anziquan burial shows mammoth meat contributed roughly 35 to 40% of his group's diet, supplemented by elk, bison, and smaller animals, while plant foods, though present, were minor contributors. Imagine the rhythm of hunting expeditions, scouts moving silently across the plains, the tension of closing in on a herd, the coordinated strike of spears, tipped with meticulously fluted Clovis points, and the raw, visceral sound of animals falling. These hunts required deep understanding of animal behavior, terrain, and timing, along with finely honed tools capable of withstanding tremendous force. Yet the effectiveness of Clovis points against megafauna has been debated. Experimental archaeology demonstrates penetration of elephant hide, but some scholars argue that hunting such massive creatures would have demanded group strategies beyond what tools alone could achieve. Smaller game, from jackrabbits to tortoises, supplemented the diet, demonstrating adaptability and ecological knowledge. The reliance on megafauna, however, tied the Clovis way of life to precarious ecological balances. As the late Pleistocene climate shifted and large herbivores declined, so too did the stability of their diet and the foundation of their culture. Some researchers suggest that overhunting may have contributed to these extinctions, though others argue for climate-driven causes or a complex interplay of factors. Sitting back and picturing the landscape, the rolling plains, the shadowed forests, the echo of distant mammoth footsteps, it becomes clear that the Clovis people lived in a world that demanded mastery, patience, and courage. And yet, the very creatures that sustained them may have also signaled the beginning of their disappearance, leaving behind a mystery as haunting as the footprints and fluted points that remain. Silent witnesses to a lost civilization whose ingenuity could not forestall extinction. The world of the Clovis people was one of both abundance and peril, a landscape shaped by vast glaciers, shifting climates, and dramatic environmental transformations. Rivers carved valleys, plains stretched endlessly, and forests rose and fell with the ebb of the Pleistocene epoch. Seasonal changes dictated movement, hunting strategies, and settlement patterns, forcing highly mobile groups to adapt constantly. Evidence shows that stone sources for toolmaking were sometimes hundreds of kilometers away, indicating not only extensive travel, but also intimate knowledge of the terrain. Imagine traversing frozen plains, navigating treacherous passes, or following the tracks of herds across open expanses, each journey demanding foresight and resilience. The onset of the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to colder conditions around 12,900 years ago, introduced new pressures, changing vegetation, altered watercourses, and fluctuating populations of megafauna. Clovis groups may have had to adjust hunting strategies, shift campsites, or rely more heavily on smaller game and plant resources. The archaeological record hints at flexibility and innovation, yet also reveals the fragility of a culture deeply connected to its environment. Caches, carefully prepared tools, and seasonal campsites all speak to strategies designed to buffer against unpredictability. Yet even these measures could not guarantee survival. Some researchers argue that environmental stress alone contributed significantly to the decline of the Clovis culture, while others point to human-driven factors like overhunting or competition with emerging regional groups. Picture a campsite at dusk, smoke curling into the crisp air, the scent of hides and cooking fires mingling with the chill of an encroaching cold spell. Children huddled near warmth, elders watching the horizon. Each element of daily life was entangled with the rhythms of the natural world, every decision critical for survival. And yet, the larger force is the relentless push of climate, the disappearance of key prey. The reshaping of landscapes would ultimately challenge the resilience of even the most skilled and adaptable hunters. The story of Clovis adaptation is one of brilliance and vulnerability, of humans negotiating a delicate balance with a world both generous and unforgiving. A balance that would eventually tip toward mystery and disappearance. Among all the traces of the Clovis people, perhaps none is more intimate and revealing than the burial of Anzaquan, a young boy interred near Wilson, Montana, over 12,900 years ago. Wrapped in ochre-stained artifacts, the child's grave contained over 100 stone and bone implements, carefully arranged, suggesting a deliberate, reverent ritual. Sequencing of his genome has provided a rare and profound glimpse into the ancestry of Clovis peoples, revealing connections to contemporary indigenous populations of Central and South America, and a more distant link to northern North American groups. Even more striking, Anzaquan shares genetic lineage with Siberian populations, affirming the long-debated theory of an Asian origin for the first Americans. Yet the story is far from simple. Variability in genetic closeness among ancient and modern populations indicates that by the time of the Clovis culture, Native Americans had already diverged into multiple groups, spreading across vast distances and adapting to diverse landscapes. This single burial, a tiny human form amidst the grandeur of the continent, bridges tens of thousands of years, offering evidence of mobility, connectivity, and shared ancestry that tools alone cannot convey. Picture the careful placement of each artifact, the subtle red stain of ochre, the reverent spacing, perhaps marking the boy's passage into a spiritual realm or signaling status within the group. The grave encapsulates both life and mystery, a child, a people, a culture, all encoded in DNA and artifacts, yet leaving us to wonder about language, stories, and daily interactions forever lost. Anzaquan is both a window and a reminder, a tangible link to the Clovis, offering insight while amplifying the questions. How did these early Americans live? How did they interact? And what forces led to their disappearance, despite such sophisticated culture and mobility? Every strand of DNA extracted, every artifact counted and measured, whispers answers and raises new uncertainties, leaving us with a profound sense of connection to a vanished world that can only be partially reconstructed through science, imagination, and the silence of the archaeological record. The sudden disappearance of the Clovis people from the archaeological record remains one of North America's most enduring mysteries, a shadow stretching across millennia with no definitive explanation. Some researchers point to environmental pressures, The onset of the Younger Dryas, a rapid cooling event, would have altered water availability, vegetation patterns, and the distribution of megafauna critical to Clovis survival. Others suggest human-induced factors, particularly overhunting, may have contributed to the decline of large herbivores like mammoths and mastodons, unraveling the delicate ecological balance that Clovis relied upon. Yet, there is also evidence of cultural evolution rather than abrupt collapse. As megafauna diminished, Clovis groups may have gradually adapted into regional traditions such as Folsom, Cumberland, or Sewanee, dispersing knowledge and technology across North America while leaving the classic Clovis toolkit behind. Could disease, perhaps introduced from migrating populations, have played a role, silently thinning bands already stressed by environmental and dietary pressures? Some speculate about complex social factors, conflicts over resources, breakdowns in long-distance trade networks, or internal group fragmentation that reduced cooperation and resilience. Even technological factors, dependence on large, specialized tools and caches might have become liabilities if mobility or prey availability shifted rapidly. The truth likely lies in a convergence of causes, a fragile web of interdependent variables tipping toward disappearance. Picture the vast North American landscapes, snow-laden plains, drying riverbeds, forests reshaping themselves, mammoth tracks fading into the dust, Clovis hunters moving with urgency, seeking game that is vanishing. Their sophisticated toolkit, caches art, and social networks, all hallmarks of adaptability, could not fully offset the rapid transformations of the late Pleistocene. Each artifact left behind, each scattered cache, each genetic trace like Anzaquan, is a breadcrumb along the trail of a people who once thrived but ultimately receded into mystery. And so, as we examine the evidence weighing climate, ecology, human behavior, and cultural evolution, the Clovis story remains tantalizingly unresolved. Did they vanish, evolve, or disperse? Were they victims of nature, of themselves, or simply participants in a world undergoing unstoppable change? The lingering question echoes across plains and forests, inviting us to imagine a civilization lost yet never truly gone, hidden in the shadows of prehistory. The story of the Clovis people is not just a tale of disappearance, but a testament to human ingenuity, adaptability, and mystery. From intricately fluted points and finely crafted blades to caches of tools deliberately stored for future use, every artifact speaks of a people who mastered both their environment and their craft. Their seasonal camps, social networks, and evidence of symbolic expression reveal a culture as complex as it was mobile, bridging survival, ritual, and art. Yet, despite this sophistication, they vanished, leaving only fragments for us to piece together, a puzzle scattered across continents, buried in soil, stone, and bone. Today, the Clovis legacy lives on in the regional cultures that followed, in the genetic echoes found in Anzaquan and other ancient remains, and in the inspiration they provide to those who study human resilience and mystery. As we reflect on their story, it serves as a reminder of the fragility of human existence, the delicate balance between culture and environment, and the enduring allure of questions that may never be fully answered. Sitting with this history, we can almost hear the echoes of mammoth footsteps fading across open plains, the flicker of fires in vast, dark forests, and the silent hands of Clovis children shaping bone and stone, leaving traces of lives lived tens of thousands of years ago. Their disappearance is not the end, but a bridge to understanding, inviting curiosity, respect, and imagination. As you ponder this lost civilization, let the mystery linger, allow the questions to guide you, and remember that history is not only what survives, but also what is sought, questioned, and imagined. If this journey through time has intrigued you, pulled you into the shadows of a vanished world, and sparked your curiosity about the hidden stories of our ancestors, don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow explorers of history, and subscribe to the channel for more immersive dives into mysteries that science has yet to fully explain. Every click, every view, helps keep these ancient echoes alive, letting us continue to uncover, question, and marvel at the extraordinary lives that shaped the dawn of humanity in the Americas.